Thank you, Madam President, and may I just take this opportunity to congratulate you and all of the committee on organising what is set to be a fantastic term this Trinity. I have never been to America. I have never eaten frog's legs. I have never spoken on this topic in a debate before. When used in this past tense way, the word never simply expresses facts. It expresses states of affairs as they exist up to this moment in time. These three things, in fact, have not ever happened. But when it is talking about the future, or is used as part of a conditional proposition, like in the motion we're debating this evening, the word never has a much stronger meaning. In order to say that you would never do something in the future, you need to say that you would not do it under any circumstances. You need to say that there is some principled reason for not doing it, which holds true regardless of the contingencies of the current situation. On our side of the House this evening, ladies and gentlemen, we might succeed in persuading you that being an MP really is actually quite a good job. Or you might end up thinking that it's a terrible job. I don't know. Whatever happens, though, that is only one element to this debate. In order for our side to win this debate, we simply need to convince you that you should not say never. That saying you would never, under any circumstances, wish to be an MP is a completely untenable position to hold. Constantly criticising our MPs is the cool thing to do in this day and age. And that's fine, but it certainly doesn't justify passing this motion. This speech is going to do three things. Number one, it's going to talk about the positive reasons for wanting to be an MP. Number two, it's going to explain to you why, even if you aren't persuaded by these positive reasons, even if you think that being an MP really is an awful job, you should still not support the motion, because saying never in the context of this motion has terrible implications, both on the level of you as an individual and on the level of society as a whole. And thirdly, it's going to respond very directly to what we've just heard from the Honourable Member from Lincoln College, although I'm going to interweave that rebuttal into my main speech. Thanks. But before I move on to my main case this evening, it falls upon me to introduce to you the proposition speakers this evening. You've just heard from Mr. Noah Lax, who is a member of the Standing Committee and an English student at Lincoln College, putting these English skills to use very wisely by volunteering for ISIS, the magazine, that is. He completed the very impressive feat last Sunday of running the London Marathon, and when I took a look at his sponsorship page, he describes himself as a charitable masochist. From what we've just heard, though, according to him, the job of an MP is both charitable and masochistic, so I am quite surprised to find him sitting on that side of the House. We will next be hearing from Steve Punt, who is a writer, comedian and actor, best known for being part of the double act Punt and Dennis with Hugh Dennis, and for presenting The Now Show. He is also a programme associate for various television game shows, including Would I Lie to You and Mock the Week. I'm just looking forward to him bringing a touch of the comedy of Prime Minister's questions to our proceedings here tonight. And finally, we will be hearing from David Aaronovitch, who is a prominent author, broadcaster and journalist who writes regularly for The Times. Having been expelled from Balliol College for failing to pass an exam, he continued his studies at Manchester University, where he gained notoriety for being part of the university challenge team that went out in the first round because it answered the majority of the questions with the name of a Marxist. As someone who clearly likes to disrupt rather than be constructive, I think it's fantastic news that he does not wish to sit in our parliament and disrupt the governance of our great country. Madam President, these are your guest speakers, and they are most welcome. So moving now on to the substantive case for the opposition tonight, and my first point about why being an MP actually is a rather good job. So this morning I looked up the latest official Oxford University statistics on what Oxford graduates tend to be doing 6 months after they have graduated. The largest sector is academia. 15.5% of Oxford graduates go on to be in academia. Second is education, with 13.5% of Oxford graduates. Third is health and social care, with 9.6%. Fourth is banking and investment with 6.8%. And fifth is government and policy, which presumably includes those who wish to go on to be MPs, with 5.9%. Much lower down the list are sectors like consultancy in 8th place and law in 10th place. Now let's have a look at how some of these jobs compare to the job of being an MP. What does being an MP actually entail, other than learning how to fiddle your expenses? Well, most obviously it entails attending sessions of Parliament and debating important issues, asking questions and making speeches. You're all sat here in this room tonight, presumably because you like debating these issues, you like participating in debates and forming part of these discussions. So clearly, for every single person sitting in this room, that's clearly a very positive reason why you would enjoy being an MP. Of course, the purpose of all this debating is to produce legislation, to establish the rules and laws by which our country is governed. If you want to go into law, then surely it's a fantastic job actually to be able to make the law and not just to implement it. If you want to go into academia, which more of you will want to do than anything else once you graduate, according to these statistics, then being part of the legislature enables you to convert your very theoretical research into real practical policy that has an impact. For example, your academic research might discover the optimum speed limit to achieve a compromise between transport safety and efficiency. Well, if you're an MP, you can actually change the law. You can actually make the speed limit what that optimum is. You can have a real impact on the society around you, rather than just writing a paper. The other main function of MPs is, of course, to represent their constituents, to make sure that their needs are being represented on a national level, and to provide help and advice through running local constituency surgeries. And this is all about caring for people. And so this aspect of the job should certainly appeal to the 9.6% of you who want to go into health and social care. There are a few jobs where you're able to have simultaneously such a great impact, not only on the running of the country as a whole, but also on the lives of individual people. Sure, there are other jobs, as Noah told us, where you can have an impact on people's lives. Of course there are. But being an MP is one other of those kinds of jobs. You might well say that you would rather work for the Citizens Advice Bureau than be an MP, but that certainly doesn't warrant the conclusion that you would never consider being an MP at all. So if you want to be a lawyer, then you should vote no to this motion. If you want to be an academic, you should vote no to this motion. If you want to go into health and social care, you should vote no to this motion. If you want to be an investment banker, well, you're probably an awful person, and I don't think I want you to be in my parliament. But it's true you're not going to earn millions as an MP. But the starting salary of £67,060 is still more than 2.5 times the national average. Of course, as Noah explained to us, there are high costs of running. There are high entry costs into many important professions. But crucially, with being an MP, if you get the support of a political party, then they will end up paying for a significant proportion of those costs. So it's not as great a barrier as Noah makes it out to seem. It's true that the hours are long and difficult, but this is the case for any rewarding job. There really are many positive reasons for wanting to be an MP and for opposing this motion. But moving now on to my second point, about why, even if you still think the job of being an MP is terrible, you should still vote no to this motion. As I explained at the beginning of this speech, saying you would never do something in the future is an extremely strong claim. In the context of this motion, there is a massive difference between saying I would not be an MP and saying I would never be an MP. If I failed to persuade you just now of the positive reasons for wanting to be an MP, or if you particularly believe the arguments that Noah presented to you earlier on, then that's fine. You may well not want to be an MP. You might think that the costs outweigh the benefits, or that there are other career paths which you would rather pursue. That's fine. You would choose not to be an MP. However, there is an enormous leap to make, to move from this to the proposition that you would never be an MP, under any circumstances. And that's the motion that we're debating this evening. If you're put off being an MP by the fact that its salary doesn't compare to that of an investment banker, then this is something that could conceivably change in the future. There is actually a large movement fighting for higher pay for MPs, given just how important the job is. Clearly not, according to some people.
You were plausible up until that moment.
If you are put off being an MP by the current negative reputation surrounding our politicians, again, this is something that could conceivably change in the future. I heard a joke the other day which said that politicians and nappies have one thing in common, which is that they should both be changed regularly and for exactly the same reason. It's true that our current politicians are commonly regarded as full of feces, let's say, not wanting to swear in the chamber, as slimy, lying megalomaniacs. But it has in the past been regarded as an extremely honourable profession, and there is no reason to think that politicians will be unable ever to regain the trust and confidence of the public at some point in the future. If you're put off being an MP by the long working hours, again, another point that Noah brought up this evening, then this is not a feature of the job that must necessarily and always exist. There are, of course, ways in which the workload of MPs could conceivably be lowered. In order to ask whether we would never be MPs, in order to really assess the motion tonight, we must ignore the contingencies of the job as it happens to exist today, and instead strip it down to its very essence, namely that of representing your fellow citizens in a national parliament. That is what is essential to the notion of being an MP, representing your fellow citizens in a national parliament. So what the motion really means is that you would never, under any circumstances, wish to represent your fellow citizens in a national parliament.
On that point,
go ahead.
That would change equally as anything else you described would change. You see what I mean?
Well, anything else might change in the sense that the job of an MP is paid a certain amount and requires certain working hours, and of course those will change. But the idea of being a member of Parliament, what is fundamental to that is the idea of being a member sitting in a parliament which represents your fellow citizens. So there is that one feature which can't change, unlike all the other contingencies which go with that job. So what the motion really means is that you would never, under any circumstances, wish to represent your fellow citizens in a national parliament. This motion, as we now see it to be, is truly terrifying. And we can see this both on the level of society and on the individual. In terms of wider society, it's important to remember that the result of this motion is a decision of the House as a whole. It's not a decision of each of you as individuals. This means that if the motion passes, then the House as a whole is voting that people should never become MPs. If we apply this principle universally, as is the only logical thing to do, then we would end up with a situation where we have no MPs, and as a result, no national parliament at all. The logical conclusion of this motion is that the House supports either anarchy, total lawlessness, where every individual is left to fend for themselves, or dictatorship, with no representation whatsoever. Our democracy is extremely precious, and there are millions worldwide who would kill to be a part of it. Supporting the idea that people should never be MPs damages our democracy irreparably. Perhaps even more worryingly, though, in terms of you as an individual, supporting the motion would be a shocking indictment on your personality. It would be to say that you care so little about the fellow human beings in your community that you would never, even in principle, spend your time representing their interests. Regardless of how important the representation was, or how much you got paid, or anything else, you would still never do it. And if any of you are so disengaged from your communities that you could not conceive of ever, under any circumstances, representing the needs of your fellow citizens, then you are truly selfish, callous, and heartless, and I am ashamed to be standing in the same room as you this evening. I'm finishing up. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you walk out of the chamber this evening, you must of course consider the preliminary question of whether, in the current circumstances as they exist today, you would want to be an MP. I hope that I've persuaded you that being an MP really is a pretty good, exciting and very rewarding job, and combines many of the best bits of the careers that most of you will end up pursuing. If you agree with me on this question, then you're going to vote no. That's fine. But if you still think being an MP is a terrible job, I plead with you to consider the true consequences of passing this motion, and in particular, the impact of the extremely strong word never. This motion is dangerous, both for what it says about you as an individual and for its consequences on wider society. So on an issue as important as this, never say never. Please don't destroy our democracy. There should always be some circumstances in which you are willing to represent the needs of your fellow citizens and your community. I beg you to oppose the motion. Thank you.